Welcome to Biology My Passion. I am Soumya Harikrishna. Today we will continue the chapter Body Fluids and Circulation, and we are dealing with a 5 mark question, cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle you have learned in class 10 as well, but here we are going little more in detail. What is cardiac cycle? The sequential events in the heart which are cyclically repeated constitute cardiac cycle. It consists of systole and diastole. Systole means contraction, diastole means relaxation of both the atria and ventricles. The successive stages of cardiac cycle includes initially when the cycle is starting, all the four chambers of the heart are in a relaxed state. This is called joint diastole. During this time, the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open. So, the pressure in the ventricle falls, and as a result, blood from the pulmonary veins and vena cava flows into the left and right ventricle, respectively. But there is no flow of blood from the ventricles to the aorta and pulmonary trunk as the semilunar valves are closed at this stage. Atrial systole. The senoatrial node, which we already learned about, which is also called the pacemaker. It generates an action potential which stimulates both the atria to undergo contraction. Since atriole contracts, the blood will flow into the ventricles and the rate increases by 30%. The next stage is ventricular systole. At this time, the action potential conducted to the ventricular side by AV bundle, where the bundle of His transmit it through the entire vascular musculature. I have taught this SAN and AV bundle of His, all these nodal tissues previously. So please learn those parts well before you watch cardiac cycle. This causes the ventricular muscles to contract. So once the potential passes through the ventricular walls, the ventricles contract, that is called a ventricular systole. Simultaneously, what happens? Atrial relaxation happens or atrial diastole happens. Ventricular systole increases ventricular pressure, causing the closure of tricuspid and bicuspid valves, because now we don't want the blood to go back to the atrium. So valves always prevent backflow of blood. The next stage is ventricular diastole. Now ventricles were contracted position. Now their pressure increases. As a result, the semilunar valves open. Where are they found? At the entrance of pulmonary artery and aorta. Now the blood will go up because pressure is high. The blood has to go. It cannot go back to the atria. So the blood will flow into the pulmonary artery and the aorta. Once they enter inside these two blood vessels, now the ventricles relax. That is called a ventricular diastole. Once the ventricles relax, what happens? The pressure decreases. As a result, blood can come back. Can that happen? No. So now the semilunar valves will close. So the valves closure function is to prevent the backflow. The closure of the valves produces different sounds. Initially, when the bicuspid and the tricuspid valves close, that time the first heart sound is produced, that is called a lub. Whereas when the semilunar valves are closing, the second heart sound dub is produced. So the heart sounds are lub and dub. Lub is the closure of the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves, and the dub is the closure of the semilunar valves. Now complete diastole of the ventricle happens. Ventricular pressure further drops, so tricuspid and bicuspid valves now open. Since the semilunar valves are closed, the blood will not flow back. So pressure in the atria exerted by the blood, so the blood flows again into ventricles. The ventricles and atria are again relaxed. This is called a joint diastole. So each time, the whole process of cardiac cycle takes only 0.8 seconds. Now we have to understand two more important concepts. One is cardiac output. What is cardiac output? the volume of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is called a cardiac output. It is determined by multiplying the heart rate with the volume of the blood ejected by each ventricle during each beat. So, each beat, the amount of blood ejected by the ventricle is called stroke volume. So, how will you find out the cardiac output? The stroke volume multiplied by the heart rate. Heart beat is 72 beats per minute, whereas stroke volume is almost 70 milliliter of blood. So when you multiply this, you will get almost 5000. That is 5.5 liters of blood is pumped from the heart per minute. That is a cardiac output. So again, the volume of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is cardiac output, and the amount of blood ejected by the ventricle during each heartbeat is called the stroke volume. Stroke volume multiplied by the heartbeat, we will get the cardiac output. And the body has the ability to alter the stroke volume and the heart rate. That is why the cardiac output of an athlete will be much higher than that of an ordinary man. Atrial systole takes only 0.1 second.